record your name, followed by hash. Thank you. The chairperson has not...
Try and record this WebEx, and it looks like it has worked. So what we will be doing after the end of this WebEx today is actually making the presentation and the recording of this WebEx available on the SPSP website. So again, for those who have just joined, can I encourage you please to use the chat box to introduce yourself and let us know what your role is and also where you're working. I'd like to now pass over to Alistair, our clinical lead for pharmacy within the SPSP Medicine's work, to just give a bit of a reminder as why national priority for medication reconciliation exists within SPSP.
Okay, thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. I think one of the things we know from these WebExes and other conversations is that there's been good progress for MedRec in all boards and across all the sectors. But there's still a bit of a challenge in trying to sustain reliable processes 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, particularly in the hospital setting, the acute setting. And I think one of the things we want to emphasise is we don't want to take our eye off the ball. MedRec remains a national priority. We don't want to be into the too difficult to do box. And these webinars are just one way in which we're trying to maintain our focus on this particular topic. What I wanted to highlight to you this morning, as you see on the screen there, was an article that was published a couple of months ago in BMJ Quality and Safety, and it provides an interesting insight into why some of the interventions to improve MedRec are proving particularly problematic. For those of you who've been involved with the work streams, there'll be some familiar themes from the American authors, but it does underline that we're wrestling with some of these challenges. Just to tease out a few of the points in the article, it reminds us that the evidence base for medicines reconciliation is fairly imperfect, particularly in terms of any robust evidence of reducing harm, and that the successful interventions that are out there through trials and studies tend to be kind of more complex, multifaceted interventions, with more successful approaches in particular being heavy dependence or use of pharmacists and increased access to electronic health records. The problem then is trying to replicate those successfully in practice because they're resource intensive and resources, as we all know, are fairly scarce. The article also notes the difficulty in trying to implement MedRec within the kind of complex clinical workflows that we have, again, in different parts of our organisation. And these workflows, as we all know only too well, tend to vary frequently, not only across organisations, but often within organisations and indeed within individual sites. So I think the key message here is that improving MedRec can't be done in isolation. We actually need to look at the broader clinical workflows that MedRec sits within, and it requires that kind of interprofessional effort to understand how we can embed a MedRec process in that broader context. It also makes reference to the political and system pressures, which we know only too well, to try and expedite transfers and discharges to get patients home from hospital. And that in turn compromises the time available to actually take a proper medication history or write a discharge and prescribe safely. One other point is that it warns against MedRec measures being limited to documentation of the process. And I think it acknowledges this tends to happen because sometimes measuring the quality is hard. It can be time consuming to collect information on prescribing errors and so on. But the problem then is the whole exercise gets reduced to sort of tick box bureaucracy, which is what it's not intended to be. So I think putting quality to the fore is something that's extremely important. The article concludes by making several broad recommendations, and I'll leave you to read these at your leisure. The reference is on your screen there. But I think one final point I want to pick up on, and it is touched on in the article, and it's the importance of completing the MedRec process in high-risk patients. Where resources are limited, there's an argument that we should prioritise patients according to their risks, so whether that's polypharmacy, elderly, impaired renal function, on selected high-risk medicines, for example. And I think it's hopefully fairly obvious to us all that the clinical decision-making and the ongoing plan regarding prescribing for these patients is particularly important, and not only that, has the greatest potential to reduce harm if we get it right. One of the things I was mindful of is I'm aware several boards now have systems of clinical pharmacy triage on admission to hospital. I'd be interested in hearing from boards doing that as to how that maybe fits with the medicines reconciliation process and ties in with, trying to reduce harm in these targeted high-risk patients. So that was really all I wanted to flag up to you at the start here, and I'll hand you back to David now for the rest of the WebEx to hear from Ayrshire and Arran.
Thank you very much, Alistair. And again, it's welcome to those who've just joined during Alistair's kind of introduction in terms of reaffirming our national priority to reduce medicines harm across transitions. So with no further ado, I would like to just recap quickly in terms of the WebExes that we've held previously. This is our fourth in a series of WebExes across Scotland to try and promote the learning and sharing across boards around efforts to make this kind of medication reconciliation process reliable, but also reinforce the importance of the clinical processing components in reconciling medicines at points of transition. So we've had, as I've mentioned before, 3 previous WebExes. We conducted 2 test WebExes in late 2015 that really just highlighted an opportunity for us to learn how we could work these WebExes between, first of all, Highland and Dumfries and Galloway, then Lothian and Tayside. And then last month we had Greater Glasgow and Clyde share their story, and again today we're hearing from Ayrshire and Arran. And to help with our learning, we're pulling together a national summary document that after each WebEx we'll update with 3 key points from each of the boards. And it's fair to say from a national perspective, it's quite clear from what we've learnt ourselves that medication reconciliation is a complex clinical process. And one of the keys, particularly in the acute setting, for success has been the engagement of senior medical leaders. We're also wanting to share with you, from the board's perspective, each of their 3 key points in terms of what we'd encourage you to contact them to learn more about after the event. So again, this document here that's available on the SPSP website has key points from all of the boards that have shared to date, and we updated the report in March with the 3 points from the Greater Glasgow and Clyde WebEx that we hosted. And again here there was quite a clear reference around the importance and value of an oversight group and linking to the Area Drug and Therapeutics Committee to support this type of work. And it's fair to say, I think, Alistair, you did quite a lot of the presentation on behalf of GGNC last month, so it is appreciated. But you're able to focus on the use of electronic applications to support MedsRec and looking at how you can access information related to medicines via a clinical portal for community pharmacists. Bless you. So before we move on, can I again just ask that everybody, I'm about to pass the ball across to our colleagues in Ayrshire and Arran, but can I ask that you put yourselves on mute if you're not speaking, as we will do as well, just to try and keep the noise to a minimum. So, Pamela, I ask you to put yourself off mute and I will pass you the ball. If you wouldn't mind letting me know when you get the ball, and we'll put ourselves on mute as well.
Hello, can you hear me?
Indeed we can.
Okay, thank you. Don't know that I've got the ball yet, but anyway, I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Pamela Mills. I'm Principal Pharmacist Redesign in NHS Ayrshire and Arran. And what I've tried to do this morning is collate work from several different fields in Ayrshire and Arran that have also been working on medicines reconciliation. So this morning I will hand over very shortly to Duncan McNabb, who I hope is on the call.
Yes, I'm here, Pamela.
Great, thank you. And he'll present from GP primary care perspective, and then unfortunately nobody else was available this morning to present, so I'll present for mental health, paediatrics, and also the acute setting as well. Okay. So, medicines reconciliation story so far. In Ayrshire and Arran, we have medicines reconciliation happening probably like lots of other places throughout the country in primary care, in the acute adult setting, in paediatrics and in mental health. We started off in the acute adult setting and then mental health started off very quickly, getting quite enthusiastic and thinking that there was a benefit for them to be involved, and paediatrics and primary care. So this morning what we're going to do is just share examples from each different area. So we're going to start off with GP primary care. So Duncan, if you just let me know when you want the slide moving on, I'll move them on for you.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you very much, Pamela, and good morning, everyone. My name is Duncan McNabb. I'm a GP in Irvine in Ayrshire, and I'm also one of the GP patient safety leads in Ayrshire. And I'll just be telling you a wee bit about what we've been up to as far as MedRec's concerned. So SPSP in primary care was launched back in April 2013. In Ayrshire and Arran, we've got 55 GP practices and 44 signed up initially. That's been growing slowly since then. We basically launched the process with a full-day meeting describing the different work streams and trying to describe why we're developed the resources that had been developed, such as the MedRec Care Bundle and things like that. And the way this was developed was part of something called an enhanced specification, which means that GPs were financially incentivised to report their data related to medicines reconciliation. They also received monthly benchmarking data from their audit data to compare them against their peers, and we had local collaborative meetings twice per year. So roughly about 20 practices sent 2 people to them, usually one GP and one admin person. And they ran twice a year for people to reflect on their performance and their benchmarking data and to discuss the systems they had in place to see if these could be improved or changed. Do you want to flick it on, Pamela?
Yeah.
So those of you who work in primary care will be very familiar with the MedRec bundle, and those who have seen other of these WebExes will have seen it before as well. But there is a move here to try and select, if you like, the more complicated patients, the more at-risk patients. So looking at patients discharged from acute medical admission or those over 75. And what we're talking about here is MedRec, so following discharge, so it's altering the electronic patient health record in the GP practice to mirror the changes that were made during hospital admission. And the care bundle consists of workflowing the document, which means sending it on to the GP who looks after that patient on the day of receipt. Then performing the MedRec, initially it was within 2 working days, but that actually expanded to 5 working days because Ayrshire and Arran supply at least a week's worth of medication, even if they're in blister packs. So it wasn't felt needed to be done within 2 working days.
Sorry, Duncan, can I just stop you there? It's quite difficult to hear. I'm getting a number of private messages stating there's a lot of noise on the background. So I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but can I just ask Paul, can you please put yourselves on mute? We can hear a side conversation going on in the background. And Duncan, can I ask if you wouldn't mind just perhaps speaking a little bit louder as well, just to overcome any of the interference that might be coming through?
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you. Thank you.
That's okay. Then the next part is discussing any changes with the patient or their representative, so their carer. And often we've had to discuss with the pharmacist as well, especially if it's people who've been on blister packs. So that's the care bundle that's been used in primary care. And can you click it on, Pamela, again? And this is data that's been, it's all Ayrshire data combined. So what this shows is the percentage of patients for whom all the measures in the MedRec bundle were achieved. And we collected data on a monthly basis from May 2013. And this shows steady improvement to begin with and then reasonably well maintained as time went on. Now, we stopped collecting data in March 15 when we moved to different areas of SPSP, but some practices have continued to do this in a more intermittent basis, and we'll hopefully get some of that data in the future, but we don't have any as yet. Practices were given some training in QI methods and, you know, particularly PDSA and stuff like that. But we did not collect any of their PDSAs or what they did with that. That was up to them of how they worked through that. But some practices developed different templates, either paper or electronic templates, to aid the process of MedRec. And I know there's a few of these about, and Greater Glasgow and Clyde have one as well. Can you put it on, Pamela? So some of the things that have come from this process that have been very valuable is actually the analysis of significant events related to medicines reconciliation following discharge. And this year what we've done now is practices are doing SEAs, and these are now being peer reviewed by NES. We're using a human factors ergonomics framework to do that, and that's really helping us try to understand some more of the causative factors in relation to why things haven't happened as they should. It's also been really useful in informing the primary-secondary care interface. Obviously, there's a lot of difficulties at times of transition for patients, and a lot of this is directly fed into the interface board, particularly around warfarin, patients on warfarin being discharged, and that's work ongoing to try and improve the process there. It's also led to some of the GPs being involved in the new doctor induction at hospitals and jointly delivering that learning with the pharmacists, just trying to stress the importance of the immediate discharge document. Patient involvement, some practices have managed to do that, but not universally so. Can you pop it on, Pamela?
Yeah.
Some practices have used storyboards in their waiting rooms to inform patients of what's been happening. Practices we've used some of the stories relating to problems around immediate discharge letters at the collaborative meetings, again just to highlight some of the problems and to allow practices to consider their systems. We also took part in a pilot project, again run through NES, relating to always events, which are events that are so important that they should always happen when people interact with healthcare, and this led to some innovations in practices relating to how they were informed about the changes on their immediate discharge letter. And the other thing that we developed was some teach-back training for the admin and clerical staff in Ayrshire and Arran, just trying to, if they're speaking to the patients, making sure that they understand changes in their medication. And move on again, Pamela. So one of the main successes is really practices having some time, being in a room together and able to talk to each other is probably one of the biggest successes. Sharing ideas about their own systems, learning from each other and learning about QI. And also the other success really is work being moved up the level, if you like, and informing the interface board. There have been significant challenges in this, and obviously the perceived workload about this, the time away from practices for GPs and admin staff has been a problem. There's been a shift in culture about talking openly about your problems and your systems and sharing these with practices, which tends to not really happen much in GP. There were probably initially a bit of limited understanding of how to use the data to drive improvement, and we've been working on things like that. And you know, as you know, the problems around the interface are very difficult and very complex and difficult to improve, but that is being worked on at the moment. I think that's probably all I've got, Pamela, is that right?
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Duncan. So I'll move now on to talking about mental health, and I do apologise because it's not an area that I'm involved in at all, but unfortunately the team from mental health, they're actually building a new purpose-built hospital, so they're all very involved in that. It's opening in a couple of weeks' time, so they've got a lot of work ongoing with that. So I'm going to try as best I can to present their data. So we do have a run chart, which is from Medicines Reconciliation Monitoring in Park Ward, which is an acute adult admission ward that takes mental health admissions for patients aged 18 to 65 years. And you can also see that initially the Medicines Reconciliation was a bit variable, but then fairly quickly they seem to proceed to having sort of a good compliance with the accuracy of the Medicines Reconciliation documented. Oops. They also monitored the accuracy of the inpatient prescription chart. Now that was something I think at that time that was relatively unique to the mental health team. So they had posters that they displayed in the ward area, sort of encouraging, you know, all the criteria that need to be included to accurately complete the inpatient prescription chart. So the right medicine, including the doses, making sure all the the boxes were signed for. So you can see they had some interventions as well about sending letters to the medics of what the correct procedures were, when obviously that had been a drop down, and you can see that that had an immediate effect of actually improving the accuracy of the prescribing, and then it's included in the induction training. So they do seem to have achieved success by using those interventions. One of the other things that they actually did as well was they changed the type of medicines administration trolley that they were actually using, because in mental health wards, unlike in the acute setting, what happens is the patients come into the treatment room to get their medicines rather than the nurses going round bed by bed. And they felt by having individual sort of sections for each patient, it would help simplify the process of administration and also improve knowledge and understanding about the medicine. So you can see some of the comments that the patients have put there in relation to getting their medicines, and they feel that this has actually also helped in actually sort of improving the reconciliation process, because the patients are sort of more able to be involved in their medication rather than sort of just being sort of, given their medication. So that's the mental health point of view. And I will now quickly move to paediatrics. And again, unfortunately, none of the team from paediatrics are available this morning, but I did have quite a long chat with Scott Williamson, who is one of our paediatric consultants who's been leading on this work. So hopefully I'll explain. So in paediatrics, they're just looking at admission medicines reconciliation, and what they've been doing in the last few weeks is every week they've actually been auditing 10 notes per week. And how they've actually sort of tried to do that is to put it onto something that was already happening, because I think everybody probably struggles with having sort of measurement and time to do the measurement. So the junior doctors had a Friday handover meeting anyway. So this is just something that's been tagged on to the end of their handover meeting. And it is actually the junior doctors that are completing this audit with sort of, consultant input as well. So they're actually doing a few things really. The first thing is they're actually going to see if the medicines reconciliation document has actually been filed in the notes. Now, paediatrics is probably very different from other wards in that their patients tend to come to wards and may only be observed for a few hours and then discharged home. So the patients that they're actually looking at are patients that have had at least an overnight stay in hospital. And because of that, what tends to happen is the patients move from like one ward to another ward if they're going to stay in hospital. So what they were actually looking to see was the medicines reconciliation document completed, and if so, was it filed in the notes? And then they were actually looking at the accuracy and the completeness of the actual forms that they found. When I come on to show you the graph in a minute, you'll see that actually, despite having the doctors auditing themselves, which thought might be something that would then spur them on to complete the medicines reconciliation better, it actually didn't result in any improvement. So there are some changes planned. So it's just a 7-week cycle that I've got the data for so far, but you can actually see that it actually started off better and has actually decreased over the time period rather than increasing. So, I mean, the consultants are trying to reinforce the importance of, completing the medicines reconciliation form. And when we come to then look at the actual analysis of the documentation, again, you can see that actually it's still not very good, with a 20% compliance at 1 week. So, I mean, from the point of view, the process point of view, all the junior doctors that work in paediatrics, they've all completed the LearnPro module. They've all got ECS passwords. But part of the challenges, as described by Scott, is the fact that quite often the doctors will speak to the parents and say, you know, is your child on any medicines? And they'll actually say, no, no, they don't take any medicines. And they'll actually go into the ECS and print the ECS off and then see that they're taking inhalers or creams or something like that. So then they'll go back to the parents and say, you said, you know, child Smith wasn't taking any medicines, but, you know, what about these inhalers? Oh, right, I didn't realise that was a medicine. So I think that possibly is a universal problem, but probably very particular for paediatrics because they tend not to be on the same number of medicines as adult patients would be. So currently what they're actually going to be doing is reviewing the actual process of clerking in patients and really trying to get the nurses engaged as well to sort of say, you know, when we're taking these patients from this ward to the other ward, has the MedRec form been completed? Is it filed in the notes? So that might be a way of actually improving what's actually happening. So that's paediatrics. And finally, on to the acute adult section. Currently, what we try and do is we audit 5 case notes per week, and it's done in collaboration between the pharmacists and doctors. Initially, it was sort of a fairly senior pharmacist, sometimes a junior pharmacist, and one of the consultants, but now we're trialling with some of the middle grade doctors as well. Oops. Hang on, I'm going back the way for some reason. So admissions MedRec. So what we're actually collecting is all the information in relation to have the 2 sources been documented, have allergies been documented, has the medicines plan been documented, and the safe and accurate transcription. Consultant review. Initially, when we were actually looking at it, we were wanting to check to see whether the consultants had reviewed the patient on the ward round and if this had any influence on the review of the medicines reconciliation process. But you can see now that we've got 100% review of patients, but actually it's not really impacting on what's happening with the MedRec in relation to the accuracy. The safe and accurate transcription, you can see that started off very poorly and has improved. Now, obviously, we've implemented our hospital electronic prescribing and medicines administration system into all the sort of medical wards now, and that certainly has improved the number of medicines that are actually being prescribed, because quite often medicines were getting missed off. And, you know, again, it was quite often things that, you know, maybe didn't seem important to the doctor and for that specific condition, but if somebody's got glaucoma and they don't get their eye drops, that's really significant. And likewise, if they've got psoriasis and they're not getting their dermatological preparations, again, that's really serious for them. So certainly HEPMA has improved how easy it is, I suppose, to prescribe medicines and the accuracy, but we're still sort of challenged with the safe and accurate transcription of medicines. And then if we actually go to look at the identified errors, you can see that the error total and omissions probably go pretty much hand in hand. So medicines omissions are still our greatest significance, although they have come down, you know, quite nicely, I suppose, in relation to sort of having HEPMA introduced. When it comes to the discharge medicines, again, we audit the same 5 patients for the discharge medicines, and again, it's just looking at the information that's documented. So you can see, I mean, HEPMA has certainly improved a lot of things. Patient demographics, all the information is pulled directly across from the system, and for allergies, you know, there's been particular improvements in that because, again, HEPMA, you're not actually able to prescribe any medicines until you've actually input information about the allergy, and then the allergy information is pulled straight into the immediate discharge letter. So documented changes are improving a lot because it's certainly easier to sort of record information, and the doctors are actually, you know, putting a lot of information about changes to medicines. But again, safe and accurate transcription of medicines. It used to be, before HEPMA in discharge letters, sometimes the doctors would really just write no changes to medicines. Sometimes there has been incidents where the doctors have only actually put on medicines that they want dispensed onto the immediate discharge letter rather than putting all the medicines a patient's on. But I would have to say that's significantly improving, because it is so much easier just to put all the medicines information across onto the immediate discharge letter. So the quality of the discharge letters since HEPMA implementation has drastically improved. So the errors, again, you can see that the error total really kind of reflects almost what's happening with medicines omissions. So this is obviously where we need to focus our sort of improvement on. So really just to talk about innovation, so HEPMA implementation, we found it has a very positive impact on medicines reconciliation and especially on the discharge information. As I said, demographic and clinician details are always pulled across now, and the allergy information documentation has improved from 5% to 99%, and we've had fewer omitted medicines. So I think the key points that we would like to share from what we've actually done is that, you know, by the implementation of HEPMA, it really has improved our medicines reconciliation, particularly the discharge medicines reconciliation. We've also sort of changed our service to focus on medicines reconciliation. So we have pharmacists working in accident and emergency in the front door to start the medicines reconciliation very early in the patient journey, because obviously if we have things identified and prescribed properly initially, it prevents a lot of complications later on, and particularly at discharge. So we're sort of seeing benefits of that. And the questions that we would like to sort of know more about from other areas, we'd really be interested to know about any other areas that are completing medicines reconciliation in maternity units, because it's something that we actually don't do, but certainly there's keenness to actually do that. And we recognise that obviously, you know, patients coming into maternity units nowadays can be on many medicines, and you know, it is an area that we should be working on. We'd also be interested to find more about community team involvement in completing medicines reconciliation, because we have like technicians and sort of pharmacists working out in the community that are inputting into medicines reconciliation. I suppose it's just how we tie it all up with what's happening in primary and secondary care, and really just about data collection improvement, if there's a way to sort of improve this. Because that's something I think that we're struggling with, like just, you know, having time to be able to complete the data recording. And that's me.
Excellent, and thank you, Pamela and Duncan, for taking us through the various aspects of the activity in Ayrshire, and Pamela for taking us basically on a very good whirlwind tour of some of the areas that I know that you're not directly involved in, so I appreciate that. And I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to be catching the chat as you've been going along, but there's been plenty of questions and discussions, and I guess from my perspective, that's what I'm really keen to open this up to do now. What I might do is actually use the chat box to start with, but can I encourage people that do have questions, feel free. This is your chance to get off mute and speak. But I will just quickly go through the chat, because there has been quite a bit as we've been going through. So I'll just go back. And Pamela, would you mind passing back the ball, if you wouldn't mind?
How do I do that?
I think I can just take it off you, actually, so don't worry. Okay. So thank you very much. All right. So just going through, and I know there's, I think, Duncan, you've been asked a couple of questions, and you've responded to them in the chat box as well, so I appreciate that. But I think the first question that came through that I can recall was from Alec, who's working in NHS Fife, and it was in relation to the work that was going on in primary care. And it was specifically to do with, there's so much chat that I'm scrolling, but Alec, did you want to jump on and ask the question that you had in terms of, I think it was to do with the number of days?
Yes, I was just interested to see that it was extended from a 2-day to a 5-day, and wondered if there was any feedback from the community pharmacies, or was there any maybe added pressure at the 50 with queries to the GP if they didn't reconcile in community pharmacy?
There's not been much feedback about that. I mean, people are discharged with 28 days of medication. It's only the people in blister packs that come out with 7 days. And there's also been the complication, Pamela will probably know more about this, of a pilot going on about people on blister packs, the hospital pharmacist directly contacting the community pharmacist. So that actually caused some problems in the fact that the community pharmacist had made changes before the GP even knew there was changes due to be made, because we hadn't received the IDL yet. So that did cause a few problems, but generally extending it to 5 days didn't make a huge difference.
Thank you for that. And Alec, is that you speaking? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that was me. I was just saying thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. And again, just going through the chat box, there's again a lot of comments. Elaine, I know you asked initially around the teach back, which I think Duncan had answered in the chat box, but I think you also posed a question to Pamela, asking particularly around the accuracy, if the accuracy of the patient's prescription chart is linked to HEPMA. Did you want to expand on that at all, Elaine?
I think Pamela probably explained it as she went further through her presentation, to be honest. So it did look as if that HEPMA had made things a lot more accurate.
Yes, definitely. I mean, obviously, the mental health ward, part board, wasn't on electronic prescribing. But obviously when the wards from Ailsa move to Woodland View, they will be going on to HEPMA as well. So, I mean, obviously that was still an inpatient paper chart. But yeah, the change to HEPMA has actually, made things so much easier and better. So it definitely has improved things.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Thank you. Just again looking through the remainder of the chat box, I know Matt has commented that I think there was discussion around the impact of the consultants. Pamela, you honestly reflected around the fact that even though there was a consultant review, it seemed to have potentially not a lot of impact in terms of the overall completeness of MedRec. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah, I mean, we have tried things like a MedRec pause, but I mean, I think the challenge that we've particularly been facing is just the acuity of the hospital. I mean, we do present the information as presented to the clinical governance meetings. The charts are there. I mean, we've tried various interventions. I mean, it sounds a bit daft. We used the ECS MedRec report, and the consultants have bought staplers to make sure that these get stapled into the notes, and all sorts of things. But I do think that's part of the challenge that we're facing. It is just the sheer volume of patients that we're experiencing that actually makes it difficult for people. I mean, it's not that they don't necessarily want to do it, but they've just got so much work to do. But yeah, the consultants on the ward round, I mean, it is something, what we're actually in the process of doing in Ayrshire and Arran is like we're actually completely changing what we're doing as part of the Safer Medicines group. So we're actually going back to the drawing board, doing new driver diagrams and things like that to try and come up with different tests of change and things too. So we'll see what we come up with when that's all finished.
Excellent, and we'd love to have you back on the WebEx series to tell us how you've gotten on. I think there'd be quite a number of people interested to learn about what a refresh might look like, particularly at a board level in terms of their approaches. So Matt was commenting the fact that I think they're testing in pediatrics the use of a ward round checklist that includes medication reconciliation. I don't want to misquote you here, but I think that's kind of Matt's comment there.
Correct. Yeah.
Excellent, and thank you for sharing that. And Fiona and Carol have also commented that in some of their acute adult wards, they've got a ward round checklist. They're finding a higher compliance with MedRec. So it seems to be, I guess, varied in terms of its impact where it's being used locally. Alison, you've asked a question around the note reviews being carried out. Is it something that's occurring on every unit or just in a pilot site?
This is in the acute medical admissions unit, because obviously that's where we want to target initially, because that's where most of the admissions come through. I mean, the two sources thing, I see Alec has asked that about that as well. It's not documenting two sources, which is one of the challenges that I think is sometimes the work is actually being done, but it's just not been documented. So, but yes, I take your point. I think sometimes the doctors don't always use two sources.
And again, I was really keen to see, and thank you, Duncan, you've answered the question, but Pamela, you were reporting the fact that within the acute care setting there was a significant increase in terms of the quality of information that was being generated at the point of discharge.
Yes.
I was just keen to sort of learn whether the GPs were able to notice that and or whether they've commented, and so you know, that's great in terms of legibility as a first step. I guess that's a good point to make. So thanks, Duncan. I'm just wanting to see too. Linda, did you want to hop on the line and ask your question in terms of what you've just put into the chat box as well?
Yeah, it's really good to hear about all the connectivity going on in Ayrshire and Nairn, and it's really quite encouraging. But from my perspective, I'm quite keen to learn of any kind of nurse involvement that you are perhaps aware of or perhaps thinking of in relation to kind of medicine's work across both kind of, you know, the acute and primary settings. Particularly kind of, you know, thinking about within Ayrshire and Nairn, we have a large number of ENPs in post. So they are actively involved in both the patient admission and discharge process for these patients. So responsible for med-rec on admission, responsible for completion of discharge scripts, etc., and kind of helping kind of bridge the link between the kind of acute and primary care setting, if you like. Also, thinking about the kind of general ward nurses again, thinking about their roles and responsibilities in relation to med-rec, not just from an administration point of view, but, you know, for the nurses in the ward being that kind of key link with the multidisciplinary team. From my own experience, it was often after the nurses were doing a drug grind, they would come to me and say, "Oh, Linda, we need to change this, the patient's not getting this, or you need to add this on," or whatever. And also thinking about their link to the patient involvement and the relatives. Also had some interesting conversations with some charge nurses, particularly around, you know, especially at front door services. So thinking not just about, you know, independent prescribers, but thinking about nurses who are actually using patient group directives for administration of, you know, kind of simple analgesics and things. Also kind of linking that into young ward nurses, thinking about you know, symptomatic relief policies, etc. So really, I would just be keen to learn of anything that's going on, or are you any plans to sort of kind of include nurses and, you know, kind of promote their role or anything?
Pamela, I don't know if you, it's Sarah McDonald from Ayrshire and Nairn. Do you want me to answer something?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you to reply, Sarah.
That's okay. So, Linda, yeah, so obviously I'm one of the pharmacists involved in Ayrshire and Nairn, both with education and patient safety work. So what we've done over the last year or so is make sure that we've brought the ENTs and our nursing colleagues in around the education that's delivered to make it consistent between all of our staff involved in the med-rec process. As far as our audit teams, particularly at Ayr Hospital, we've got a bit more of a challenge getting consultant involvement in our audit process because we don't have acute medical physicians. So we are looking at including the kind of nursing staff in the kind of auditing process. Actually, just in the past week or so, I've had a meeting with some of the charge nurses and nurse practitioners within the surgical side at Ayr Hospital, and they're very keen. I think Linda was involved in this work before she left Ayrshire and Nairn around establishing some auditing of the med-rec process. So we've had a meeting around that, and also to kind of tie in what we are teaching the doctors with the nurse practitioners. So we're looking to take that work forward within the next few weeks, looking at restarting auditing within our surgical receiving unit at Ayr Hospital, and that is likely to involve one of the nurse practitioners and the charge nurse, as well as we're going to involve some of the middle grade and junior medical staff to try and do it in a bit more of a real-time process so that they're getting the feedback on the standards of med-rec at that point, and we can make any kind of necessary changes to any processes and tests to change. The other thing that we had recently is we had problems with the uptake of people using the medicine reconciliation report from ECS. People were just printing out the ECS as it stood, So that's something that we've went through with the doctors and the nurses and the surgical side, and we're looking at implementing that test and change over the next few weeks to see if that improves our standards. So I don't know if that helps to answer some of that, Linda.
No, it absolutely does. That's really encouraging, and I would be keen to, kind of keep in touch and learn, the kind of what you're doing. Again, I've been in contact with your charge nurse in the surgical ward as well previously, and sort of highlighted there is a very good example of nurse-led MedRec work going on down in Borders, and I forward contact details and things, so that might be worthwhile exploring as well. But no, that's really encouraging. Thanks very much for that. I was just wondering, Duncan, just in relation to your practice nurses, district nurses, etc., is there any sort of kind of work going on or plans for any kind of work there?
Well, as you know, each GP practice is very different, and some don't have any ANPs, whereas others have one or two ANPs, and so some practices have been using their ANPs, I think. I believe anyway, in their MedRec processes, but not aware of them using, if you like, the traditional practice nurse, and certainly I don't think district nurses are involved in this process. But yeah, it's certainly a role that could be developed, although I think there's a push certainly in primary care now for more pharmacy involvement as well, and practice-based pharmacists to start becoming more prevalent. So I don't know where the role of nurses would be if that materialises.
Yeah, I'm just thinking from your district nurse point of view as well. So a lot of the time they're going to administer insulin, kind of monitoring washrooms and things as well. So it would just be good to get their perspective on it. So if I could maybe get in touch with you and maybe see if you would mind forwarding an email or whatever, just to
no problem,
get an idea of what kind of practice nurse, district nurse thoughts there. Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thanks very much for that.
Thank you very much. I'm not wanting to stop what is really good conversation in terms of questions and sharing. I just wanted to give an opportunity. I know Esha and Aaron have shared quite a bit today and have been asked a few questions, but they've also asked us a couple of questions in terms of what they'd like to know more about. So I just wanted to see if there's anyone on the call that might be able to comment around MedRec and maternity units. And I know we've just spoken around community teams' involvement in MedRec, and any tips or comments around the challenges associated with data collection for improvement. So again, it's just an open call. If anyone's got anything they'd like to share, or at least openly commit to get in touch with Duncan and Pamela after the call, we'd love to hear from you now. Wow. So overwhelmingly supported here with the things you'd like to learn more about, Pamela. One of the things I can comment from a national perspective, medication reconciliation as a priority certainly will be part of the next phase of McQuick. I don't want to get into too much detail in terms of the plan and time schedule for that, but it is definitely a piece of work that they're wanting to progress, and it will be using essentially exactly the same definitions and processes that have been outlined in the cell that everybody, or the CMO that everyone's been working to in acute adult and mental health. So that will happen over time, but I'm not personally aware of any maternity units that are currently testing and sharing data. I think it might be something that might be picked up along the progression of McQuick. In terms of community teams' involvement, that's something we're really keen to explore as well. We're aware, again, in Borders that there are pharmacy technicians going out into the community team. This is a pilot work that we're really keen to learn more about from Deirdre Moss, and we've asked her to share that as part of their WebEx that's coming up potentially later on in this year. So again, I think there's a lot of interest, and if we can prompt boards to share those particular bits and pieces as we go along through this WebEx series, we'll be able to build up some knowledge around that, but it certainly is an area of interest for a lot of people. I can't comment on data collection for improvement because it's not something that I do on a day-to-day basis here, but again, if there are others that have got any comments, I think there were potentially a lot of people wanting to hear about the ease or potential ease that HEPMA may have brought to actually collect this type of information, but it sounds like it's still a potential challenge in Esha and Aaron, is that right?
I mean, we still sort of traditionally have to sort of go through the MedRec form, which isn't on HEPMA, so that doesn't really help us. I mean, there is work ongoing nationally to create a HEPMA MedRec form, and I know we've got a consultant and the HEPMA team going down to London, I think this month, to look at potentially, I suppose, a possible version of it, but how soon an electronic MedRec form is in the offing, I'm not sure, because sometimes, you know, it takes a while for the electronic versions to become sort of workable. So that is the future as well. But yeah, no, we still have to go through the paper that's recorded in the case notes just now.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So can I just ask again if there's any other final comments or questions from those on the call before we wrap up?
Hi, David. It's excuse me, Alistair here. Yeah, I just want to ask Duncan and Pamela. Duncan picked up a very good point about the importance of learning from significant incidents through doing SEAs, and I'm sure through Datix and other systems as well in the board, there's kind of broader learning. I just wondered if there's any key learning points that would be worth sharing at the moment from the incidents that have been reviewed already.
Well, that's something I'm theming at the moment. I work in NES as well, so I'm actually part of the process of reviewing all these significant events at the moment, so that will hopefully be something that I'll be able to fill you in on later on.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I mean, I could probably give you some off the top of my head if you want. I mean, it is mainly about the main instance we've had probably have been around warfarin. And that's where a lot of our work has been. They've probably been the most serious ones, but there's lots of, if you like, smaller learning things that we'll be able to fill you in once I've got a fuller picture of that. And
most of that, I presume, is in relation to the sort of GP practice-based errors, or at least at the interface of the discharge bit. I'm just wondering, again, in the hospital setting, Pamela, do you have any learning from your incident learning system there?
I mean, what we do is we get a Datix incident trend report presented to our Safer Medicines group, where basically we look at all the incidents. And Jacqueline, are you on the call?
Yeah, I can speak on that. It's Jacqueline Seenan here from Ayrshire and Arran as well. We do look at all our Datix medicine trends, and we take that along to our Safer Medicines group, which, you know, so we're discussing like our SPSP work and MedRec, and then we also, one of the other things on the agenda is this Datix report. And yeah, we do look at themes, and if they're usually every 2 months, I would say, our themes around medicines reconciliation. And we have a chance within the group to, you know, discuss those trends. Again, it is often issues around omitted medicines and that type of thing, or a nurse has picked up that certain medicines have been missed off when they've gone to do administration. So again, we put those back in a report that goes as a bulletin out to all our prescribers and clinicians, just, you know, sort of good key recommendations and learning points, and we kind of do it that way.
I think that's helpful, and I think it'd be useful, again, you know, probably this webinar of sharing things between boards, and I think where boards like your own are teasing out these themes and summarising them, I think if we were able to find a way of sharing that information, I think it'd be really useful, both in terms of the root cause, but also as you pick up there the processes that actually catch these errors, you know, the importance of the checks and the balances in our system, and I think it'd be really helpful to see where that has, you know, prevented harm happening to patients.
And I think what we also do, I mean, you're relying on the people you're sending these bulletins out to read them, and we know not everyone does, but, you know, Sarah, who's on the call as well just now, what part of her role is doing the education, the face-to-face training with the junior doctors, so if there are some key things that are really relevant to feedback to the juniors, we've got that loop as well, so it's always every month trying to see, you know, what's the best way of trying to give feedback, and we know not everyone will take on board some of the learning from it, but it's small steps of trying to help with the process, and I think that's the main thing. Everyone's finding it is a challenge, and as Pamela's pointed out earlier as well, it's a challenge because everyone and, you know, all the clinicians are so busy with it, but it's how we can sort of tap away at it and try and get everyone involved with it.
I think, Jacqueline, just to add about that as well, I think one of the things we've found really, in terms of looking at the errors and the feedback to the doctors, I think having a link with Duncan and other primary care leads has really helped in terms of education, and also getting a bit of feedback around incidents that we kind of will have any from primary care that are significant might get passed back to us to investigate. So particularly the ones that Duncan's saying, we know we've got a lot of challenges around communication on things like warfarin, then we're kind of doing a bit of pilot work around how we can use our electronic systems to improve that at the moment. So I think that's been one of the key things we've found over the last year or two has really helped, is having that link up.
Excellent, and I really appreciate everyone's comments and discussions, and I hate to be the one to actually call it to a close, but we are coming to time in terms of our WebEx today. Can I, just before we conclude, thank both Duncan and Pamela for really giving us quite an honest overview in terms of progress, successes and challenges that are happening in Ayrshire and Arran. And again, the chat box I think has reflected the level of interest in terms of the questions and comments from those that have joined us. So I do want to extend the thanks to everybody that's on the call. Before we do come to a close, I just want to highlight the fact of the next WebEx in this series. In May, it's actually again on the 19th, which is not a Tuesday. Our WebEx series are moving to a regular slot of the third Thursday of every month between 3 and 4 p.m. So NHS Fife are going to be presenting on the 19th of May, followed by Grampian and then Forth Valley. So just to confirm too, we've got a commitment to make sure that all of these resources are available. We are in the process of actually publishing all of the presentations that have been shared to date, and we'll include the recording of today's WebEx on the SPSP Medicine's website. So for those that who are Twitter literate, we'll be tweeting once all those resources have become available, but for those who rely on more standard processes like email, we'll also let you know via email that when all the resources are actually on our website. So I'd like to again thank everybody for joining, and we look forward to continue to share with you as we progress through these WebEx series over 2016. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.